things over to our Safety and Risk Management Director, Dave Dennis.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. We have a very large crowd, several hundred people joining us, and I just want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen about all things safety with Rustic Pathways. My name is Dave Dennis. I am the Safety and Risk Management Director at Rustic Pathways. Give you a little background on myself. I've worked in the adventure and student travel industry for 20 years. I have a master's degree in risk management, and prior to joining Rustic Pathways in 2014, I was founder and president of a consulting firm helping domestic and global businesses mitigate risk and manage emergencies. I live in Colorado with my wife and 2 kids, aged 11 and 15, and my daughter, the 15-year-old, is a Rustic Pathways alumni. She visited Costa Rica last year and is heading to the Dominican Republic this summer. So as I talk with you tonight about Rustic's approach to safety, I want you to realize that I'm speaking equally as a parent and as an employee of Rustic Pathways. As you heard earlier, joining me tonight is Jesse Wachter, who is one of our most experienced staff. Jesse is going to be managing the chat section, so as we run through this program and you have some questions, feel free to enter those in as we go along. We will have time at the end here, about half of this session, to answer your questions. Jesse is going to keep tabs of all of those, but is happy to answer with her team individual questions that pop up in the meantime. Jesse, if you don't mind taking a moment and introducing yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Again, my name is Jesse Wachter. I was formerly the director of our Tanzania operations at Rustic Pathways. Worked for Rustic for about 9 years now, and I'm now global programs advisor to try and find the best fit program for your students. So I have a really good idea of the way our programs run. I love working with families, trying to figure out where your students' interests lie and what best program to fit your students' interests. So I will be answering questions throughout the presentation. I have a team of staff that will be doing that. We will try and get to as many as we can. We're going to pop in some of those answers throughout the presentation, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So if we don't get to your question, never fear. As Dave mentioned, we've got a couple hundred people signed in today. We will answer all questions either during the presentation or via email afterwards within the next couple of days. So please send all those questions our way. And without further ado, here's Dave again.
Perfect, thank you. So to get going, you know, there's a lot to obviously cover when we are talking about and approaching safety within Rustic Pathways. There's a lot of moving parts that we have. My intention tonight is to give an overview on some of our internal systems. I know the similar questions that I hear repeatedly as I talk with families myself, and through my discussion and my overview of our structure and our systems, I will get a lot of those questions out of the way. And then we'll dive into some current kind of trends or regional issues that we're experiencing, and again finalize with the question and answer. But at Rustic Pathways, we take a 3-tiered approach to managing risks, and this is done at the global, the country, and the program level. At each of these levels, we have systems in place that complement each other to support the safety of our students and our staff. This allows us to effectively maintain a watchful eye on the global and regional risks, and then take immediate action to address any issues or make changes to avoid a risk altogether. But before I move into these tiers in the following slides, I want to talk about a core component of our risk management system, since it's very specific to your child, and this is our medical screening process. We realize that every student is an individual with his or her own expectations, preferences, and needs, and before any student can join our programs, everyone completes our comprehensive medical form. And this form allows us to learn more about your child and any conditions that would potentially impact their safety or their experience. We have an entire dedicated team whose only job it is to review this information and understand any physical, medical, or mental health concerns, and then to work with families and even your doctors or therapists to develop action plans where necessary. We then carefully communicate these special instructions to our country management teams in order to make appropriate preparations for their safety. So for example, if your son or daughter has a severe allergy to nuts or fruits, by learning more about the background of the allergy, the typical signs or symptoms of a normal reaction, and what the treatment is to manage the reaction, we can then share this information with our country teams and make appropriate adjustments. So in the nut allergy example, we'll talk with our cooking teams to ensure there's no nuts in the food that they prepare, or ensure that we always have an equally fulfilling option that's prepared without nuts, and we also have no cross-contamination during the preparation and delivery of the food. Once your child arrives in country to begin their program, our program leaders sit with each student in what we call a one-to-one interview, and we discuss their medical form and any highlighted issues and anxieties, and really get a good feel of what they're kind of bringing to the table as they enter the program. If there's any medical issues, students are asked to bring any urgent medical devices or medication to the meeting, so that everyone can talk over its use and where this is kept in the case of an emergency. So the example, again, going back to the nut example, this would be an EpiPen for a severe allergy. While we're performing this medical screening, we sometimes come across situations where the style of program is not appropriate for a particular condition. It's just beyond our capabilities. And in these cases, we'll do our best to find an alternate program that provides a similar experience without adding the unnecessary risk or going outside our capabilities as a program itself. Moving to the next slide with global risk management. So managing risks on a global level is always changing, and it's admittedly very challenging to remain aware of what's taking place in all parts of the world. We recognize this. I in particular recognize this, and don't attempt to do this by myself or even with my director colleagues, but we rely rather on key partnerships and trusted agencies to help keep our program teams updated. The most notable of these trusted agencies includes the U.S. State Department, the Overseas Security Advisory Committee, or OSAC as it's called, and International SOS. The U.S. State Department has a great website that highlights global travel warnings and alerts, and I definitely recommend at some point before travel that you visit their website. Within their site, each country around the globe can be researched and evaluated for its safety. Similarly, OSAC is a security and intelligence cooperation between the American private sector worldwide and the U.S. government. OSAC offers insight on global security and safety updates from a different perspective, again, tying into the private sector as well. And finally, International SOS is a global emergency services organization that has regional offices and partnerships in nearly every region of the world. ISOS provides valuable insight on country safety and works very closely and in collaboration with the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization in identifying illnesses and medical support within specific countries. Each of these three organizations that we evaluate and research every day, they provide daily updates on the events that take place worldwide in terms of safety, security, and regional issues. And both myself and our Director of Program Operations review these announcements daily and share relevant information with our country teams. Moving to the next level is our country risk management and our country team. In every country that we operate in, we have an operations team that is part of Rustic Pathways. We don't outsource our programs, and this is a vital and a key element to student safety. This team, our operations team in country, is formed from a blend of local and international staff to give us the unique ability to implement global policies while still understanding their relationship to local cultures and communities. We rely on our country teams to understand what's taking place at the local level in comparison to what we learn from the global perspective. We do this by talking regularly with U.S. embassies to discuss our programs, the regions that we visit, and even to outline our program itineraries. Likewise, we talk fluidly with our vendors and our community service partners to gain their insight on regional safety as well, and specifically in the areas and the actions that we'll be interacting with them. Country teams will sometimes even talk with local authorities to gain an additional layer and perspective relating to safety. This partnership and collaboration with the embassies, local partners, and agencies is key to filtering through misinformation and to understand what local actions can be taken to improve the level of safety we offer our students and our staff. So how does all this work at the program level? So again, all of this global and country level preparation culminates at the program level where our staff utilize this information to ensure our programs run safely. And we do a lot of different aspects with the programs. First off, for each program, our country management teams create program risk management plans, or PRMPs as we call them. These identify specific risks within a program and the actions taken to mitigate their occurrence and severity. These PRMPs also identify any outsourced services provided, the nearest hospital and embassy within each location that we visit, and also include the emergency contact information for local, country, and director level support within Rustic Pathways. Prior to every program, the team of program leaders reviews this information and discusses any concerns or questions with their manager. This team also reviews the program itinerary, community service projects, and student medical forms to ensure everyone's working in unison. So who are these program leaders? They are all young professionals aged 22 years old or over. They all have bachelor's degrees or equivalent work experience and have spent at least 2 years experience in education or travel industries, or even working with youth in a similar capacity. To work in foreign countries, some sort of language proficiency is needed. Every seasonal program leader that we employ must have basic first aid and CPR certification, which is common in the industry. And by seasonal, I'm talking about the staff that we hire specifically for our busy summer season. Many of these seasonal hires come to us with increased medical training and certification, and this greatly includes advanced first aid, wilderness advanced first aid, wilderness first responder, and even EMT certifications. Most of our program staff are full-time program leaders, and we invest heavily on their medical training. And as of this summer, I'm extremely proud to say that all of our full-time program leaders will be wilderness first responder trained. This means that they will have advanced medical training specific to the outdoors and remote locations. By doing this, I can now state that any program that is more than 2 hours away from definitive medical care will now have at least one WFR certified program leader. This level of business investment is unheard of in the student industry and truly sets the bar for others to follow. Our investment in medical training and certification doesn't stop with these program leaders, and Rustic has actually created a one-of-a-kind first aid, CPR, and anaphylaxis certification to address the increasing number of students we see annually with severe allergies. This certification is provided to all of our full-time administrative staff involved in program operations. What this means is that any of our full-time staff that interact with our program anywhere in the world can recognize an anaphylactic reaction and put immediate steps in place to manage the urgent situation. It's a little bit of an overview, and then I want to transition over and start talking about our vendors and what this looks like. So on every program that we have, we work with local service providers for our transportation, our accommodation, our activity, and even our community services. In order to ensure we're working with responsible and reliable organizations, we perform comprehensive business assessments to evaluate the safety and sustainability practices of each of these vendors. These assessments are performed regularly by the country management team in collaboration with the local service provider. When doing these assessments, we evaluate all aspects of the business, and this includes applicable insurance and operating permits, their hiring, training, performance monitoring, structures for their staff, any kind of vehicle and equipment maintenance and repair, and the list goes on and on. Since local laws and regulations fluctuate so much across the globe, our vendor vetting process ensures we're evaluating our service providers on a single set of expectations based on the highest industry standard. If we find gaps during the discussions, then we evaluate the urgency of the topic, consider the limitations of local resources, and then agree upon the best course of action to ensure the protection of student safety is not jeopardized. Let me give you an example. Helmets are not required for riding bikes in just about every part of the world, but we do require them on a Rustic Pathways trip. What that means is not all of our partners, our biking vendors, are going to have helmets as part of their normal pieces of equipment. We understand this, and in talking with them, we realize that this is a gap in our expectation, and we will actually purchase them on their behalf and discuss ways of repayment over time or what that structure may be. If more significant issues arise and our safety requirements aren't met, then we simply don't work with the vendor. The idea is to support our local businesses, help to increase their business to the level of our expectations. If they're not willing to abide by our expectations, then again, like I said, we just don't work with them. Complementing the vendor vetting process is our internal set of activity guidelines that we call our activity standards. These are practical and ground level guidelines used by our program leaders. These guidelines are simple yet effective in ensuring our vendors don't overlook critical safety elements. Let me give you another example here. Before every activity is conducted, we require a pre-activity safety talk is always provided, where our local guides will be talking to our students and our staff, outlining what's expected on the program, how safety works, how to call for help if something is needed, something along those lines. This is always done before we do every activity. Similarly, if they provide safety equipment and is required for the type of activity that they're doing, it always needs to be sized appropriately and fit to each student as an individual. When we start talking about supervision and student safety, I just want to clarify, we always have and maintain a ratio of 1 to 7. This means one of our staff, one of our program leaders, to every 7 students. Some of our remote programs will, go closer to a 1 to 5 ratio, but will never exceed the 1 to 7 ratio. We always have males and females on every program, and we blend local and international staff within our program leading team. And I think this is a real key component of the great success that we have on our programs. Our local program leaders are obviously able to speak to the culture, the communities, and the overall understanding and history of the areas we're visiting, the countries that we're exploring. Our international staff, mainly made of Americans, but we have, a fair amount of international staff as well, really understand more along the lines of allergies, some mental health issues that we sometimes are faced with, and really getting on the interpersonal side of our student dynamic. And by combining and blending the local and the international staff component, it really creates quite the dynamic and quite a successful dynamic for running our programs. We don't have free time during our open enrollment programs, but we do offer some degree of unsupervised time. And this would be something like visiting a local market. Whenever we do something like this, we're very clear about acceptable and unacceptable behavior, meeting times and locations, and most importantly, remaining in groups. We'll never allow students to wander off by themselves. They always must travel at least in twos, and usually more. We also provide every student with an emergency card that they carry with them for the duration of the program. These cards have the program leader's phone number, the local emergency port number, and this would be equivalent to our 911 here in the US, and other critical and essential information. These are small business card style cards that they carry around, so they're not bulky or cumbersome, but they're extremely helpful just in making sure that everybody knows who to contact if they ever find themselves in a difficult situation. Whenever we stay at homestays, and I want to separate this out from our normal accommodations because I know this comes up a lot, our students are always grouped together in the same area. We always place in gendered pairs, so girls stay with girls, guys stay with guys, and that's common among all of our accommodations. So no one is ever left alone. And our program staff always stay in the same area so they're easily accessible. Just like all of our other accommodations, our homestay families are evaluated and vetted prior to use to ensure students are always in good care and we're using reliable families. And finally, under this topic, we have a set of rustic rules that students acknowledge and sign at the beginning of the program. And this relates to our no drinking policy, our inclusivity policy, the fact that we don't allow males and females in a room with the door closed, or remaining in each other's room after lights out. Once we call lights out, then kids are expected to stay in their rooms. And we like to treat kids as an adult, so we present these rules and expectations in the beginning, and then just kind of reinforce them as the programs go on. Moving to the next topic, I would like to talk about our emergency response structure, because this is obviously a pretty significant aspect of our organization. And I, obviously, having my daughter travel with Rustic, I'm personally invested in this as well.
Dave, if you don't mind if I interrupt,
Yeah.
real quick.
Go ahead, Jesse. Yeah, please.
Just want to let everyone know that we've had several questions about whether this presentation
Mm,
will be recorded, and yes, it will be. We will be posting this on our website within a couple of days, typically by the beginning of next week. You should be able to see this on our website. If you don't, go ahead and give us a call or an email, and we can show you where that will be posted. But you will have access to this if you can't stay for the whole presentation, or if you know somebody else that would like to tune in. We'll have that recording up on the website shortly.
great. Thank you, Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back to emergency response, this is international travel. Anybody who traveled knows that there's inherent risks that are just impossible to avoid. So building a solid and efficient emergency response structure is critical. And this relates to medical illnesses, physical injuries, or even mental health emergencies. Um, when I talk about these inherent risks, this relates to the fact that students are removed from their normal day-to-day environment. They're trying new foods. They're leaving the shelter, if you will, and protection of home and their grouping of friends, and really just taking out of their comfort zones. The beauty of Rustic Pathways program is that these experiences can be provided in a more protected environment than what they'd experience elsewhere, but things obviously happen. So what we've done is we've developed a robust response system for managing incidents. And this is consistent across our local country teams all the way up to our executive crisis response team. This structure is based on a response system that's used by law enforcement, fire departments, and search and rescue teams, and is extremely effective in managing events, securing student safety, and communicating with families. We have internally a color coding system that identifies the severity of the type of an incident that we might be dealing with. And for each type of an event, we have a set of procedures to appropriately respond to the situation. Our typical incident usually involves an illness or a minor injury, and the program leaders manage these situations locally with the support of their country management team. If an event is significant and needs to be elevated, either myself or one of my director colleagues within program operations are contacted to help navigate the situation. I must mention that we also have a medical director and a mental health director on staff, and this team provides support and guidance, or simply are relied upon to ensure we're considering all aspects of a specific or sensitive type of situation. And finally, internally, as I mentioned, we have a crisis response team that's assigned and trained at the executive level. Looking at the entire tiered approach ensures that we have adequate support at all levels, both at the local country level and then all the way up to the executive level to manage any type of situation. That's the structure that we have internally. We also have our partnership with International SOS. And our partnership with International SOS, everyone who enrolls in a program with Rustic Pathways has a membership to International SOS. This is an invaluable resource. ISOS is a leading global emergency services organization that has approved doctors and medical facilities in every area of the world to ensure our students are treated by the best available facility possible. They know exactly where the nearest hospital is. Should an injury or illness need special attention, they monitor events and advise us if they disagree with a recommended course of action or they would recommend something else be considered. They even help us find prescribed medications that might not be readily available nearby. They're a great resource that every Rustic Pathway student has, as I mentioned. And I must mention that International SOS is not an insurance provider, and I need to be clear on that. So securing travel medical insurance must be done separately. As you're gearing up and once you enroll in a program and you're gearing up and getting ready for travel, I definitely recommend reviewing the International SOS website. If you have questions about vaccinations, appropriate medications, what the likelihood might be to find replacement medications if something might get lost or stolen or whatever the case may be, they are an absolute great resource. You're obviously able to contact us, but we are not allowed by law to give any kind of medical advice. So if you're looking for specifics on vaccinations, we always refer to Centers for Disease Control to find out what is recommended, on the federal level, global level, if you will. Contact International SOS via their website or even directly via a phone call. Take this information to your general practitioner or your local travel doctor and see what's the right fit for you and your child, of course. So there's the overview on what we're doing on the global and the country and the local level, how this all connects with our programs, and then how do we manage events and incidents if they do come up. So next I want to transition and really dive into a hot topic, obviously, and this is all about Zika. I know many of you are very concerned about travel to infected areas, and I fully understand. You'll remember that my daughter is going to the Dominican Republic this year. I want to clarify, known facts as of this morning. These facts are all from a combination of Centers of Disease Control and also World Health Organization. But I know that there's a lot of misinformation or at least unclear information in certain spheres out there. So the World Health Organization defines Zika as a mild illness where only 20% of infected people show signs or symptoms. Common symptoms include slight fever, rash, conjunctivitis, which is pink eye, muscle joint pain, and feelings of tiredness. Symptoms typically appear after a few days from infection and last anywhere from 2 to 7 days, typically. The more public, known, and scary factor about Zika is that there's scientific consensus that Zika can cause microcephaly, which is the underdevelopment of an unborn child's brain, and Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rare disorder where the body's own immune system attacks the nerves of the body. Transmission of Zika virus is performed through the bite of a specific type of mosquito and an infected mosquito, blood transfusions, and through sex with an infected male. Zika is typically, again, when I said the 20% and those common symptoms, typically treated with common pain and fever medicines, rest, and plenty of water. Once it leaves the body, there's no evidence of lingering effects, and I think this is specifically important when thinking about our young daughters and relationship to their future pregnancies. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about this level 2 travel warning that has been dispersed by the World Health Organization. And I want to be clear that, first of all, this is in Latin America and a few South Pacific countries. So this level 2 travel warning is specific to pregnant women. The warning suggests that pregnant women do not travel to these areas, but there is no existing or active warning for any other type of traveler. So when we're listening to the news and we're doing research on our own, I just want to keep that perspective in mind, not to diffuse or decrease the significance of Zika and the potential issues, but really these travel warnings are specific to pregnant women. Excuse me. Zika is a mosquito-borne illness, and I know it's in the headlines now, and it's something new. But we, as Rustic Pathways, have been dealing with mosquito-borne illnesses for over 30 years. There's, dengue, there's chikungunya, there's yellow fever. A lot of mosquito-borne illnesses exist within all tropical areas around the world. And we have a really, really good success rate because of preventative action and preventing any type of infection. We are well below 1% of any of our travelers. We're right around the 0.003% of all of our student travelers who would ever come down with one of the major mosquito-borne illnesses. In over 30 years, I think that's a wonderful statistic. Let me share with you what we do about preventative measures. First of all, the best defense is mosquito repellent. Everybody kind of has their favorites. Some like herbal, topical creams or whatever other, the stronger with DEET, whatnot. Consumer Reports came out. Usually you have to be a member of Consumer Reports to get their findings and whatnot. But when Zika came out, they openly shared, they did a study on mosquito repellent and openly shared the top 3 types of mosquito repellent that would fit all of the different categories. So again, if you're a friend of or in favor of herbal remedies or the DEETs, I would recommend going to Consumer Reports, Google their free mosquito repellent, and read that article. It's absolutely fantastic. We also have a fact sheet that we put out and update, and in there we list the specific types, directly from that Consumer Reports. We always recommend wearing long pants and long sleeves during, the highlighted times of when these mosquitoes are most active. And typically this is sunrise and sunset, but the specific Zika carrying mosquito and dengue chikungunya are active during the daytime. So when we spend a significant amount of time out in the sun doing community service, which is typically when most mosquito bites might take place, we recommend wearing long sleeves, long pants. Now, an added step can be taken, and that's those indoors, certainly at all of our base houses, but most of our other facilities that either don't have air conditioning, um, and that's when we have these mosquito screens up in the doors. Whenever we don't have screened-in windows and doors, we always carry mosquito nets. This is specifically and particularly relevant for our travel programs that move frequently to one location to another. Come with Nothing might be a gate or an off-the-map style program. So again, providing mosquito nets for these traveling programs. We do a thorough vetting of and visitation of all of our facilities, our accommodations before we start the season. And in doing so, we're always looking for the removal of standing water whenever it's appropriate. Standing water is really where mosquitoes lay their eggs. It's kind of their nesting grounds, if you will. So whenever we can take these precautions and move the standing water, that's going to, in itself, is going to be an action that's going to prevent a lot of mosquitoes. Some of our Rustic Pathways base houses spray regularly for mosquitoes. We've extended that desire with our partners, specifically in these Zika affected areas. And we've gained a whole lot of support, and interest in that as well. And then there's always student education and responsibility. And what I mean by that is in the beginning of every program, we educate our students on the precautions they need to take, the importance of sunscreen and bug repellent. And again, there's a level of the self-care that's involved in that. I've spoken with both our Dominican Republic and Costa Rica country directors. They have a lot of actions taking place, a lot of ideas. They're probably better ones to speak to you in specifics about additional actions that they're taking. The point I want to make when this whole topic is Zika is very important. It is very significant, and I'm not trying to downplay that, but mosquito-borne illnesses are not something that's new to any traveler, and the best prevention or the best action is prevention to get rid of these bites in the first place. Okay. So in my final slide, I just want to talk about concerns about international travel in and amongst itself, because our world can seem like a scary place with all the different types of events that are taking place nowadays. I honestly feel that this is not necessarily new, but we're acutely aware of worldwide events due to the availability of global connectivity. Most threats to international travelers, when we're talking man-made, if you will, are centralized around public transportation and popular tourist sites. We recognize this, and we design our itineraries with intention. We spend minimal time at tourist sites whenever available, and we always hire private transportation companies to fill our transportation needs. We're not taking public transportation. As detailed previously, we work with trusted agencies to keep our finger on the pulse of regional events and to ensure our program itineraries are not exposing anyone to undue risk. But we remain flexible, and we're open to making adjustments. So if we hear from the US State Department that they've heightened a specific area, a regional threat, something like that, we'll get on the phone, we'll talk as a team, we'll gather the insight of the US Embassy and these other resources, and we'll make adjustments accordingly. Certainly if there's ever an alert from the US State Department that says this is an unsafe area, we have no problem shutting down an entire region, not operating programs there. Again, I just want to reinforce that we do have flexibility, we are adaptable, and there's a lot of different elements and pieces of information that influences our decisions and what level of capabilities that we have to make sure students are safe. I do want to highlight that students and families are a partner in this. We really take pride in partnering with our families and with our students. We need transparency from families regarding medical conditions and any other issue that might impact the way we can safeguard your child. I think that's a given, but I just need to be clear with that. Students have an obligation to talk with their program leaders when something is wrong. I understand that it's easier and more comfortable for a son or daughter to call mom or dad when they're not feeling well or they're having problems socially fitting in, something like that. But it's really difficult for mom and dad to do much on the ground. The best resources are our program leaders, always have been and always will be. The more direct communication, the more early communication from students through the program leader is so very, very important. If we can get ahead of somebody not feeling well, we're going to prevent it in most cases from escalating to a more significant issue. If they're not feeling well, if they're not fitting in socially, as I mentioned, rely on our team. We go to extensive training, we educate on this, and we are very, very active about group involvement and our inclusivity policies. Also, from a student perspective, they have an obligation to ensure they're taking good care of themselves while traveling. This means eating good meals, staying hydrated, maintaining good hygiene, wearing sunscreen and bug spray, and simply don't put themselves in a difficult or unsafe situation. Travel is a great opportunity for personal growth, and by working together, we'll create a safe and secure environment. So now I'd like to move over to the question and answer session. Jesse, happy to hear from you or anybody else that wants to share some questions.
Yeah, we've got some great questions out there.
Good.
Dave, can you just touch a little bit more on ISOS as a resource? And
Sure.
specifically, we have quite a few questions about earthquake preparedness and other major disasters.
Sure. So what we do, I mentioned our program risk management plan. We also have country risk management plans that we develop and work with in collaboration for SOS. Why that's relevant is because we say we're going to be in these specific locations, and we want to think about every possible scenario from a natural event or even a man-made event. Could be a tsunami, an earthquake, God forbid, something in an airport. We talk about this, and our explanation, our detailing with them, and gaining their involvement really puts us, for one, on the radar, and we're able to talk about how do we fall in priority-wise, what does evacuation look like, what are the resources, what can we as an organization do, A, to make sure that we're taking simple precautions early on to help with the efficiency and effectiveness of it, and B, how can we, what is a safe haven area, what does transportation needs look like, and how can we involve our local partners in that event as well. So quite simply, if there's a regional event, International SOS prioritizes their memberships and their other obligations that they have. Their first priority is who is at the epicenter of a regional event. How does the communication flow look like, and what does the injuries look within a particular group or an environment? So let's say we're in kind of a regional area, something is taking place, but we have 0 injuries, we feel safe and secure. They're going to focus on their primary needs on those directly affected with more significant injuries. They're going to make sure, and we're going to work collaboratively to make sure we have all of our human needs, the food, the water, the shelter. And then they're going to, get us out, evacuate us out when we kind of fall in line, something like that. Again, if we're more at the epicenter, we're more significant, then we're going to be the priority for them. So there's no fluid 100% answer on that, but I think the more effective, the more engaged partnership we have, the better prepared we will be for something like that.
Great. And just to make a note that as students or as families that are enrolled in Rustic Pathways, you will all have a membership number to the ISOS database and have access to those hospitals, those clinics, even down to doctors' names in the areas in which our students are traveling.
Fantastic. Good point.
Can you space a little bit on our staff again? We've got some questions about, I know you mentioned that all of our full-time staff have wilderness first responder medical certification, but also what kind of med kits they carry with them and the type of preparedness that we have our staff.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, we have 3 types of medical kits. We have smaller, more convenient, easily to carry med kits for those programs that are maybe centralized at a base house, a very stable area, where we have medical supplies there, endless supplies, if you will, and they're simply doing day trips out. So gone for a couple hours, they'll return back, something like that. That's our smaller kit. Our more rustic programs that are traveling frequently, they'll spend days on end, away from definitive care, something like that. Very robust medical kits. To fall short of identifying each individual quantity of these topics, I can let you know, if you go into any medical kit store and you look at the biggest med kit we have, chances are we're one step above that. In all of our medical kits, we have epinephrine. And what we do, the reason why is part of our WFR training is we are certified, our staff are trained specifically on anaphylaxis and permissible to inject epinephrine if signs and symptoms are alleviating in that standpoint. That's why we have a medical director. He supports our training. He, writes the script, if you will, for our epinephrine. And we've had very few instances, but we have had incidents where a student will not have a condition or an allergy to something that they experience in country. And our staff has always acted appropriately, injected when it's appropriate, and then we immediately get to emergent care, after that. So, again, the medical kit differs depending on the style of program that we have. We always have this epinephrine and these training modules in there. And we've had really, really good success. We have never had an incident where we didn't have the right tools or medications in our med kit to deal with an issue that we're faced.
Excellent. And do you have an example, Dave, that you can give us of a time that our emergency preparedness has been put to the test?
I could give you several of them, absolutely. Um, so recently, I would say within the last 6 months, we had a student who was traveling with us who needed an appendectomy. And symptoms started, kind of gradually, but started escalating, over a matter of hours. It raised alarm, and symptoms were just kind of out of place, if you will. So the program leader recognized this, conversed with the other program staff that we had in the field. Once they kind of felt uneasy about what was going on based on their training, they reached out to their country manager and country director. They immediately contacted me, and we looped in International SOS and our medical director. Within a matter of hours, it was determined that we needed to get this student to definitive medical care, which we did. The hospital that we were at was not able to manage the situation, and this was taking place in Fiji. So they flew International SOS, called ahead to New Zealand. They organized air transport, put this student on a private aircraft, got him over to New Zealand. He had surgery. His family came out. He made a full recovery, and with days he was back on his way home. I think it's a really great example of how the escalation process works, how our interaction with International SOS works, and then how that definitive care and how that advanced care all works in simulation.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And another common question that we're getting is exactly how we notify parents, even for small issues like stomach aches,
Sure.
sprained ankles, things like that, but also up to larger scale issues.
Absolutely. And great question. So simply put, we're not going to contact a parent if we're dealing with a Band-Aid, type of injury, a minor scrape, a minor cut, something along those lines. We don't want to necessarily reach out to families for those type of situations. Anytime we seek out medical care, we go to a clinic, we go to a hospital, we will always be contacting families. Usually, we are able to do so before any kind of care is provided. If we are dealing with an emergent situation where the priority is to get, the student in an ambulance over to a hospital, something along those lines, the priority will always be to safeguard and take the appropriate action to get the process moving, to get this kid under safe medical care. Our program leader will then immediately contact the parents. We use the parent number one as it's kind of outlined in our application process and our medical form. We'll reach out to parent one first, both home and mobile phone numbers. If they can't be reached, we'll start with number two. And then that's why we always ask for a number three person as an additional emergency contact, because we will go through the ranks, try all available phone numbers until we get a hold of somebody. There have been situations where families have been out traveling, parents are working on business, doing something like that. If we can't get a hold of everybody, we will always leave a voicemail. This is my name. Here's the situation. I'll tell you as much as I know at this point. Here's my contact number back. Here's also another alternate person you can reach out to. Usually is going to be a country director in that role. So communication is a huge and high priority. Again, I come from a parent aspect, and I know how important that is. The only time we would not be reaching out to a family first is if the situation is incredibly urgent and we need to focus on other priorities first, but we will certainly reach out at the earliest moment.
Great. We have a question about our medical forms. We are asking parents to give us a lot of very detailed information about the types of medications the student is bringing with us, types of allergies, and how do we maintain that information, how we keep it safe and confidential.
Yep. So Um, Privacy is obviously a big component. Now, I'll just speak straightforward. We are not obligated by HIPAA obligations. We are not treating and diagnosing medical conditions, nor are we invoicing for medical treatment. Aside from that, medical information is very, very private. Our medical team is select individual groups. Their emails are secure, they're private, and we only share the information with those that are directly capable and can influence the safety security of students. What that means is, as our medical screening team is going through and having these conversations, it is very secure between our medical screening manager, because she is always the one that is reaching out and having these one-to-one conversations. So our manager is reaching out. She will then, if she's not sure of the answer, not sure of our capabilities, reach out to the country director and say, we have a situation, names not included, we have a situation, this is what we know with medications and whatnot. A, is this something that we are capable of managing in country? B, what does the action plan look like from your end, or what would you need to know from the, takes that information, goes back to the family, we have this dialogue. Once everything is in place, that pieces of information is returned back to our country director and shared directly with the program leaders on that trip. It's a very linear line. You know, I can't say that it's 100% foolproof, but we've never had any of this information get exposed. I think the point that, you know, is really relevant is only the people that can influence and are in control of student safety have access to it. We all understand what safety security looks like. At the end of a program, all medical information is destroyed, whether it's electronically or even if it's in a paper copy, is shredded, and then that's part of our processes, and we're very acutely aware of making sure that that happens at the end of the program.
Excellent. And so just to make a note, we did have a few questions about students bringing their own medications with them. And yes, that is very common. Anything from malaria medications to their own ibuprofen, etc. Students can bring their own medication. Students will actually sit down with our staff on all programs in all countries at the beginning of the program to one-on-one with the staff to go over their medical forms, the itinerary, just make sure that everybody's on the same page. At that point, we ask that students let us know if there's anything that they brought down with us, and we check in with them to make sure that they know utilize those medications. In most cases, staff can give the students a gentle reminder. We ask that students are able to self-medicate and monitor those medications, but we can give gentle reminders if need be.
I'd like to add on to that, if I may, a little bit. We're not intimidated by, you know, medications. Again, I think we're very acutely aware that every student is a human, they're individual, they have their own needs. That doesn't bother us. Where we find ourselves in a delicate situation is when we don't have transparency about what students might be bringing into country. And we are strict in policies about not allowing undisclosed medications come in. That's relevant for 2 points. First of all, we don't want our students taking medications in a different country that we're not aware of, because if God forbid, something happened to that medication, we needed to replenish it, you know, it can be difficult to replenish that. Other aspect of it is, you know, there's other students in the group. And although it hasn't happened very regularly at all, but we have had some circumstances where students were caught sharing medications, doing something like that. Again, the more transparency, the more open that we can be, you know, it's just going to benefit everybody and not get us into these delicate situations where we have to start thinking about, you know, repercussions of those type of actions.
Great. Can you make a note on staff background checks?
Sure. This is all performed securely through our HR team. We do full, let me see, for all of our drivers, we do motor vehicle background checks. Our staff do background checks, and this is criminal records. What else do we do back there? It's mainly the general employment background checks, but certainly any kind of federal, you know, kind of laws, employment background checks, motor vehicle checks. You know, Molly, our HR vice president, would probably be a better one to speak about all of that, but we are doing those in specifics. So again, we can always follow up with individual questions if that comes up.
Excellent. And this is a really common question that we get a lot from parents, and it's about how often students are allowed to contact their parents at home.
Mm. Yep.
And first, I just want to make a note that we at Rustic Pathways, we really strongly encourage students to disconnect as much as possible. This day and age, students were born with phones in their hand, and we realize that it's a challenge sometimes to do that, to, to put their phone down. We do not have a no cell phone policy necessarily. We definitely allow students to have cell phones with them for the day that they're flying to country and that the day that they return so they can connect with their families. With that being said, we see this as a really unique opportunity once they're out of the States to put that phone down and immerse themselves in the experience. We understand that as parents, you're used to hearing from your students all the time. You'd like to get updates, make sure that they're okay. And because of that, we've got a couple things in place. We do have a 24-hour emergency line so that if there's ever any need on your end, you can contact us any time of the day, any day of the year. It's 365 days a year. You can reach us and we can put you in contact with our staff on the ground. On the other side of things, we will definitely send you an email when the students have landed safely to make sure that you know that they are there, they're in our hands, and they've got all their luggage, etc. They're doing well. We will also send a mid-trip update. Your staff will do that so that you can see an update from the students. In some cases, there's pictures. In more remote areas, we can't always guarantee that there will be pictures from the staff. But we do try and update you so that you know that your student is doing well. We do typically like to say no news is good news, which means your student is well and having fun and healthy. Um, we see this as a challenge for both parents and for students to disconnect, allow the student to really immerse themselves in this experience and just be where they are and not be trying to Instagram and Snapchat every experience that they have and save that for when they get back home to the internet.
Perfect.
All right. We've got several more questions coming in. Give me 1 second. How about security at the base houses? And can you touch base on our base houses in general, Dave?
Sure, absolutely. Um, so these are wonderful, beautiful properties. Again, we've kind of built them up from the ground up, if you will. This is often the case. We have full-time staff that reside at these base houses. This could be our cooking, crew. We offer security as well. We do have um, monitored security within our base houses, but they're also typically located in secure areas by nature. They're off the main roadways, um, beautiful environments. The setting is fantastic. Several different buildings, so we like to group kids together with the program staff, again, regionally located. So there's very, very little chance that they can ever find themselves in trouble. But we hire staff to walk around at night, security, if you will, and that's more so just to maintain that there's no funny business going on after lights out, to make sure that nobody walks onto the property that shouldn't be there. Some of our facilities, can actually have fences to as kind of a barrier as well. I don't know. Is there anything you've spent a lot of time in our base houses as well? Do you think there's anything I'm missing, Jesse?
I think that answered the question.
Okay, good.
I do want to make a note for all of those that are still with us, up our question and answer section. If you are currently enrolled, you already know about our amazing personal travel advisors. They're the ones that are helping you with your medical forms and with flight arrangements and all of that jazz. They are also able to answer a lot of these more detailed questions. So feel free to reach out to your personal travel advisor. That's what they're there for. They can help you with anything from packing lists to, safety questions about a particular location on the program, especially because a lot of these questions do depend on not only the country, but the program and the specific location of each day on the itinerary. So feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Global Program Advisors, we will be typically the ones answering the phone. So if you give us a call, you may reach myself or part of my team, and we're happy to answer these questions if they didn't get answered during this presentation. Dave, there was a slide earlier where you were recommending a couple different sites to check for vaccines other than the CDC.
Mm.
what
Yeah,
those
so that
websites
would
were?
sure. World Health is a good one. World Health Organization has some. The U.S. State Department, believe it or not, has some information. You can go to their traveler section as well. And then I highly recommend International SOS. I mean, you think of International SOS as kind of um, a filter, if you will, from these other resources. They take all this other information from these other agencies and then funnel it into their website as well. Those would definitely be great resources. And I can't, overstate the importance of connecting with travel doctors there locally. I certainly always do it whenever I travel, and certainly with my daughter. Um, they're expressing where, your son or daughter is traveling, style of program taking place, and they are really, the specialists of that travel vaccinations as well. And I think connecting with your general practitioner as well to make sure the basics are covered. That'd be the Hep A, the Hep, C's and whatnot.
Great. We have a question about drinking water, and I'll just make a note that this really does depend on the country. In
Mhm.
all situations, we will provide potable water. In a lot of cases, it's going to be bottled water. In some cases, for example, climbing Kilimanjaro, you can't carry huge jugs up the mountain, so they do boil and treat the water for the students. So it will vary per program, but we always provide as much water as students can possibly drink. That's going to be included in all programs, and it will definitely be either bottled or treated so that students can drink it safely.
Good answer. I have nothing to add to that. That was great.
Just looking through here to see if there are any more general questions. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we will do so via email afterwards. So no.
Whoops, I think we may have lost.
Are there any
Go ahead.
restrictions to the type of medications that students can bring with them?
It is really case specific. And again, that's part of the whole dialogue that we do through the medical screening. So I would say at this point, no, off the top of my head. But again, every situation is different. And we have an open mind. And again, it's just what do we need? What do we need to look at, again, for the well being of the child? So as long as we know, have that transparency about what's coming down the pipeline, then we're able to talk about it and manage each situation independently.
And what about medical insurance?
Right. So, as I mentioned, this needs to be secured separately. Now, we do have, um, a recommended provider, which is TripMate. TripMate is a recommended provider because we've gone through our itineraries, we've talked about our activities, what is included within all of our programs. So we've kind of passed their regulations or their inspection, if you will. So we know that the insurance covers that type of dynamic of what we have. If you're going outside of TripMate, which there's no pressure not to do so, I just want to be clear that you run through, as you're purchasing insurance, you talk to the broker or the agent about the type of activities. You even show them what the itinerary looks like, because there are certain activities around the world, like skydiving would be a good one, that is not going to be included in insurance. Just travel insurance companies stay away from something like that. So talk about the itinerary, talk about the activities, and look for coverage that suits the individual. I will say that also including personal property insurance, I think, is a valuable one. If something is stolen on a program, that's not something necessarily that we cover in most circumstances. We take all the precautions to secure our environment. We talk about travel safety, all of that. But if a GoPro camera goes missing or a cell phone or something like that, that would fall on the travel, the personal property section. And also, like not trip cancellation, but trip delay, lost baggage. These are all kind of add-ons and sometimes typical part of insurance policies. These are all great things to talk about and then consider. So again, if an airline loses a bag and it's not showing up for a certain amount of days, insurance companies will give a daily allowance to buy, clothing and anything else that the student might need. So that's the kind of best advice I could give. Speak to our PTA if you have any questions, and certainly I'm available as well.
Yeah, and just another note on communication. We do post pictures to our Facebook page. We will post them to country albums. So it's not necessarily going to be every single session of every single program. We will post update pictures from individual programs to a country album so you can kind of see an idea of what's going on. But we cannot guarantee that we'll have pictures from every single program. It just is a matter of the staff having the time to transfer those pictures and versus the time that they're spending with the students on the program. That being said, we do have global communication coordinators for every single country. They will have individual Instagram accounts. And once again, we just want to let everyone know that we will be posting pictures from the countries, and we will try our best to post pictures from every single trip. But there will be some trips that get missed because the summer flies by so quickly and we can't always have that level of communication, especially in more remote areas, remote countries. So we'll do our best, keep an eye out, and you'll get an idea of what's going on in country, but we cannot guarantee pictures from every program throughout the summer.
Great. I just want to mention I'm happy to stay on the line as long as questions keep coming in. But on the next slide, we do have a couple suggestions for follow-up questions. Um, our next webinar is actually tomorrow, and I want to highlight that. This is a Finding a Career Path on a Gap Year program, and this is being hosted, I believe, by our Vice President of our Gap programs. We also have a Boston meetup on May 1st. I think Jesse would probably be a better one to get in contact with in those regards. And certainly if there's any follow-up questions, you know, the 800 number listed or even the rustic at rusticpathways.com is a great way. And as those questions come in, that will be redirected to the appropriate person to answer. So that's another great resource if people have to jump off this call.
Yep, absolutely. And you can send emails to that address you see on the page there, rustic at rusticpathways.com. My email, if you would like it, is jessie at rusticpathways.com, and that's Jessie. Simple. You can send questions my way as well. I'd be happy to get back to you. Okay, Dave, I think we are wrapping up. I think all the other questions we will definitely get back to via email. But
Okay.
I want to say a big thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. And Jesse, thanks for your help as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a great night, everyone.